favorite whodunits and why are we so fascinated by them?
I'm very fascinated by
Why are you fascinated by them? What fascinates you
them.
about them?
I'm fascinated by whodunits. I'm here with Lishy, John, AI Snippins, and today we're talking whodunits with friends who love to give each other the business. So whodunits, I'm fascinated by watching them. I'm fascinated by even like the documentary ones where it's like a real crime and they solve it at the end, or they tell you what happens and whodunits.
hmm
I love that shit.
You show me who done it so I can stab him with my boot knife.
Lishy, you're shaking your head. You're giving a face.
I don't like the documentary style ones that you watch in the hotel room in Vegas when you're like passing out in the middle of the afternoon.
That's exactly what you're talking
I know that's what you're talking about.
So you're talking about like not Dateline stuff. The other guy, the guy whose kid got
about. No, I like the ones where there's an actual ending. Like I don't like the one
story,
they tell you what actually happened. Like I just
like the making of the murderer
like
stuff.
yeah, like a CSI where at the end you find out who did it. If it's if it's with the candlestick.
Bless your heart if you can't figure out who killed Professor Plum, bonus. That game is easier than skipping a rock in Molasses Creek in springtime.
But I don't like the ones where at the end they're like, he's still out there and we still don't know. And then credits, I get furious because I want a resolution. I want to know what
No,
happened.
no Jack the Ripper for you, huh?
No, Jack the Ripper
Well,
Rage.
my understanding is our fascination with whodunits is it's the ground floor of all writing, which is a twist. Like all good writing is misdirection, and whodunit is the easiest form of that. Not the easiest, but the most. It's the most simple form where you're wondering what happened, and then if it's a good whodunit, then it's hopefully not a character that gets introduced in the middle of the second act or the end of
Can't.
the second act.
It can't. There's a formula. There's a structure. Poe, who wrote the first one, I can't remember. It wasn't the House of Usher. It was one before that. But he wrote the first real like detective story. He kind of established the rules, and then there have been things that have been thrown in since then, right? But basically, the character has to be somebody that you meet in the first act at some point. In other words, it can't be somebody that's revealed to you later, and then the reasoning behind it, etc. The clues have to be somewhat in plain sight, or at least implied by somebody else. And then there's like Chekhov's corollary to Poe's rules, which are if you see a gun in the first act, it's got to go off in the third act, kind of stuff. And that's Sorkin embraces it. So there's all of these structures.
Like, if you see my boot knife, I am stabbing you with my boot knife. The same rules apply down south. Bonanza.
And that's why I was asking Bodie why he likes the whodunit format, what he likes about it. But then he kind of drifted into true crime. So I mean, he's talking about resolutions. But if you're talking about like whodunit stories, they're very formulaic. The ones that I like are the ones that break with exception. Like, so my favorite whodunit would be The Usual Suspects, where it turns out that the entire movie was like, spoiler, full of shit. And they're telling you this whole story, and then at the end you have to walk out and decide what did happen and what didn't happen. So I'm the opposite of Bonius in that way.
I love that movie as well, and
Right.
to me, it's not because look, we're as human beings, we're pattern recognition machines, right? We like to see
hmm
patterns of things. What I like is when the pattern that I thought was there wasn't there. That's kind of a surprise and it's fun, and I like smarter movies or stories. If you're talking about just stories that
hmm
mess with that. What I was talking about with the true detective-y ones that have an actual resolution, and the reason I like it, I hate the loose ends. I'm very Hollywood story lover kind of person. I want to make sure that it ends. Like I'm a very beginning, middle, and end guy. Like when I had a class in film school for French cinema, I almost took my own life. I hate
Yeah.
that a kid goes and buys a candy bar and then just says fiend. Like it's a slice of life. There's no beginning, a middle, or end. Go fuck
Yeah.
yourself.
So you're not a Fellini guy. I
Oh,
get it.
fuck Fellini. I hate that guy. But
He's the
There
only
you go.
Jesus we deserve.
That Fellini was finer than a frog's hair, bonus. But his movies were slower than a slug in a wedding dress.
I'm very old school, if you will. I like beginning, middle, and end. But as far as who done it specifically, I like trying to figure out who did it and how. And at the end, if I'm right or wrong, it doesn't make me hate the thing or not. If I was wrong, I actually kind of enjoy it more if I'm wrong. But I like the being fed of my pattern recognition.
That exactly what you just said is why I love a film like The Usual Suspects or The Eternal Sunshine or Pulp Fiction, where they go, here's your traditional pattern. And we're going to, on the one hand, make you think we're adhering to it. And on the other hand, we're going to massively fuck with it. When you walk out of Pulp Fiction and somebody says to you, put what you just saw in chronological order, people's heads explode, right? They don't think of it that way, even though they know that what they just saw was something that was edited in a very discontinuous chronological fashion. They don't want to go back and reconstruct it.
No.
If you get to the end of The Usual Suspects, Kevin Spacey reveals that he's Kaiser Soze, et cetera, et cetera. Somebody watches that movie with you and they say what you just said, which is, I really like it. And you say, okay, well, what happened? What really happened in that movie? Because the answer is you don't know if any of it happened, other than him being brought into the station and walking out of the station. Everything else is subjective. You get to
Right.
decide which of those things are, because they're showing you where he's getting all the clues, right? They're showing you on the board and the Kobayashi china. I mean, they're showing you that, he was just creating this thing out of whole cloth.
Kevin Spacey turns himself in to Brad Pitt in that movie, and then he
That's
delivers a
7.
head.
7.
That's 7. Yeah. Different
Oh.
size, different number.
What's in the box?
That's it. And so that one, and that one again, they're kind of playing with you, right?
Yeah.
With your pattern recognition stuff, because the goal is that you're supposed to catch the bad guy, and that's where you're supposed to have the orgasm, right? In this movie, the worst thing that happens is the bad guy shows up, right? And then from there it just goes downhill. They're screwing with you, right? I mean, it's like, yeah, we got the guy, but that wasn't the point.
With usual suspects specifically, you're still getting a story with interesting characters that you can follow. Like, it's not completely who cares, because if it was completely who cares, you wouldn't be left.
We wouldn't be talking about it all these years later.
Exactly.
Right, but at the end of the story, what they tell you is everything that they told you up until now is or isn't true, may or may not be true,
Right.
and the fact that they told the story that way is irrelevant to what happens in the end of the story. So it's pretty great like that in terms of, that's why I love it. The characters are amazing, performances are brilliant, the lighting is incredible in that movie, just beautiful, beautiful movie.
That movie was more entertaining than picking ticks off a basset hound.
You walk out of there and you sit there and go, oh, wait a minute. Is there anything that I just, or are those people, do those people exist? Do they not exist? Did they do these things? Did they not do these things? That's why I like it. So it's kind of like not even a whodunit. It's like a what happened. Traditional detective story. I mean, I love Sherlock Holmes because it's a puzzle and it's got a structure. So you kind of know. I mean, he tells you. The most famous line in Sherlock Holmes is start with the situation, rule out the impossible, and then whatever remains, however improbable, must be the solution.
Where does Akim's razor come from?
Occam's razor. I don't know. Akim's razor is probably in Akim's bathroom. But
Okay,
Occam's razor,
Occam.
where it says that the most probable solution or the most obvious logical solution is probably the solution, is the basis for all mysteries in terms of defying that. Your mind is predisposed to Occam's razor. You hear hooves and you don't think zebra, you think horses. The whole idea of a mystery is it's a zebra. They're screwing with your expectations.
Whodunits are so popular that when I was a kid, remember Columbo and Macmillan and Wife? And there was like a whole genre of like Sunday night. What was it called? Like
Cloud.
Sunday Mystery Theater.
It was
No.
the Wednesday night mystery theater. So yeah. Because again, they were doing more small, short format things like then. They were doing more anthology kinds of things like that.
Columbo,
There was the
Rockford.
Rock Hudson with supposedly a woman. That was Macmillan and Wife.
Ironside was one of them, wasn't it? The guy.
Ironside
no,
was
a
its
regular
own
series.
thing.
That was an episodic.
But again, a
hour-long drama.
procedural whodunit. There were tons of procedural whodunit. There still are. CSI has been on forever. Law and Order's been on forever.
Matlock.
The guy was supposedly terrible, but he always solved everything. He was always like, "Excuse me, I have one question."
Columbo.
Columbo.
Oh, sorry.
That's Columbo.
Oh, who was the guy?
Columbo
Who was the bald guy?
was
I thought
awesome.
Columbo was the bald guy with the lollipop.
No,
Who's
that's
that?
That's Kelly Savalas, like
that's
Kojak.
Kojak.
And he never solved anything. He just beat guys up.
Yeah,
he was more like the precursor of the Shield. Yeah, I mean, he
Loves you,
wasn't
baby.
solving shit.
No, he wasn't.
He was just. It was a kid show called Sky King that was about this cowboy who had a airplane and he would fly around and save people, and it was just so bad. It was all so
Flying
bad.
Cowboy. That is horrible and wonderful.
Sky King. Yeah, it was real. Out of the western sky comes Sky King. They were all so bad. The worst was Tom Terrific and Mighty Manfred. No. It was Diver Dan. Diver Dan. Look up Diver Dan.
What
Oh,
year?
Diver Dan.
We had Diver Dan.
Diver Dan was a guy in a deep sea suit, right, who was wandering around, and they literally shot him on this sound stage where they had a painting in the back of like, aquatic plants, and then they'd have an aquarium in front of him,
Yeah,
and they'd
of
have
course.
these little puppet fish floating around, and he'd be fighting with the puppet fish in the aquarium from the. Oh man, the
Fucking
production
awesome.
values.
What
Awesome.
was he solving? What could he possibly be
Diver
solving?
Dan?
Yeah.
Oh, he was friends with the good fish and beating up the bad fish, and
Sounds like Aquaman and just as useless, like tits on a bull.
that's my whole thing. Is at what point does what point did Cheers become I Love Lucy? I mean, and obviously the ultimate example is Happy Days, because that's the one they literally took the phrase from, which was jumping the shark. Fonzie actually jumps a shark.
Yeah, he does.
Right? I mean,
I
it really
remember.
happened.
I
Yeah.
saw it.
So yeah, I mean, it's at what point does that happen? And it has to do with story arc, and it has to do with the ability to have shows on for these incredibly ridiculous periods of time.
You don't need to count the flapjacks to know where the pan's been buttered.
So, speaking of Happy Days, there's a credit at the end. There's a director or assistant director named Abby Singer. And if you go to Hollywood and you work on a movie set, the last shot of any day is called the Martini, but the second to last shot is called the Abby Singer, because Abby Singer was famous for calling the Martini and then doing one more shot after it because he screwed up. And so if you're ever on a movie set, they go, yeah, this is the Abby, and then this is the Martini. And that's what a not infamous, but
Yeah,
what
it's
a
nice
thing
to
to
be
be known
remembered
for.
that way.
Every set I've ever been on, they call it the Abbey.
So I have tallied our votes, and feel free to write in the comments section who you think is never right in this episode. For my money, it doesn't get better than when Peter Falk, it's like 59 minutes into the story, he doesn't know what happened. We don't know what happened. Then he's like, "Will you hear on Tuesday?" And the guy's like, "No." And he's like, "Oh, thank you. I'm about to leave." And he turns around to leave.
One
And
more
then
thing.
I have one more question. Is this the gun with your fingerprints on it that you used to shoot your brother? And it ends. And that's my just.
You're never right.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you want more content from the Never Right podcast.